Okay. Okay, so thanks for inviting me today, and sorry for this technical problem. So my name is Kenneth Houngbedji, and I'm going to present this this work, which is still a work in progress, even though there is a working paper out that you can read. So it's a joint work with Yasmine Bekouche, who is at Université Libre de Bruxelles and also at UNESCO, and Oswald Kusipade, who is working at UNESCO in Dakar. And what we are trying to do in this paper is actually to test an idea. Growing up in Benin, I actually did realize that whenever it was raining, especially during school days, I don't know whether it was because it was easier for my parents to just keep me at home or not, but anyway, I used to spend the rainy school days at home. And growing up, and then I was curious about it. You know, what is actually the effect of a cost related to rainy school days in terms of academic achievement? So the inspiration for this paper mostly comes from personal experience, and we got the opportunity to test it, and I'm going to present you the result that we found. And you also have to keep in mind that ultimately what we want to do, I mean, the follow-up of this study is actually to design, at least to think of better ways to help schools deal with rainy school days, because what we found is that actually rainy school days do have a cost in terms of learning achievement, but also in terms of grade repetition, because students in rainy school days basically lead to grade repetition. So why does this matter? This matters mostly because in Sub-Saharan Africa, even though a lot of progress has been made in terms of primary school attendance, we still do observe that 6 out of 10 children are out of school. So even though people can get to primary school, they don't finish primary school, and they do other things. And the question here is, why are we observing this? Are we observing this because parents don't really believe in the value added of school, and basically they just let the children drop out? Or do we have something actually much more deeper that is The other thing that we can also see is related to this value of school. Learning outcomes are usually also lower in Sub-Saharan Africa compared to other regions of the world. So maybe that goes with this assumption that even though students go to school, they don't learn much, and maybe that's why they're actually dropping out from school. And we do have some evidence that students don't seem to learn that much at school. Using the results from the PASEC, so PASEC, think of PASEC as PISA. So it is a program that regularly does test learning outcomes in primary school. And what we know from PASEC studies is that 50% of students who took the exam at the beginning of primary school basically are below the sufficient level. So at the end of a second grade, students are tested, and you can actually check what is it that they learned at the end of the academic year. And 55% in second grade are below sufficient level. 29% are below sufficient level in math. When the test is actually administered to students in sixth grade, what we find is that 29% of students are below the threshold in terms of reading and reading in French, and 62% are below the proficient, at least 62% have not mastered what they were supposed to know at the end of primary school. So clearly what this result suggests is that learning outcomes seems to be low, even for those people who go to school. So then the challenge is, how can we improve learning outcomes in Sub-Saharan Africa? So not only do we want people to go to school, but we want people also to learn from school. And maybe if we can improve the capacity of schools to produce good skills, maybe parents can actually help the students as they skills. So what do we know about improving learning outcome in primary school? In the literature, we are going to think of teacher training, school practices, and parent characteristics. And one thing that we have studied a lot in economics is actually what is the role of income. So how does the income of parents affect learning outcomes? And that is something that we have really heavily studied by using basically rainfall shock as an instrument to income shock. And we basically did study a lot what is the income effect of rainfall shock on learning outcomes. So I'm basically thinking of the work by Björkman in Uganda, Nordman, who is also who is a colleague at DIAL, who did also a nice work on the income effect, on learning outcomes. And basically what we know is that when parents are poorer, they're going either to invest less in the education outcomes of the children, but we also know that rainfall shock can have a direct effect on learning outcomes through the effect on cognitive skills. So basically, students who grew up during a severe rainfall shock can basically actually to carry a sequels in terms of cognitive skills. So it's not just income effect, it's also cognitive skills that are affected by rainfall shock. Yes, Phil.
In a soon-to-be submitted paper, it is shown that rainfall shock can also have diverse impact depending on income. Like the poorest are impacted the strongest. So I guess you can imagine that it can have a good impact on school investment. That would also be self-imposed.
Definitely, yeah, because parents get poorer, and then we have like a snowball effect. The other thing that we also know from the literature is that it's not just with those big microeconomic factors. We also need to take into account the school calendar, and basically what we are looking at here is the number of school days matter. So going to school if we only have 180 days of schooling compared to 200 days of schooling, people who have 200 days of schooling will tend to learn more compared to those who have only 180 days of schooling. There is actually a nice work by Pischke in Germany, using the fact that the school calendar has changed following reunification to show how longer school days did affect learning outcomes in Germany. And even beyond Germany, what we can also look at is when teachers are not there, then there is no schooling time. Students also seem to be affected, which also makes sense. And more studies are also looking at what happens when the school calendar is actually in conflict with the agricultural calendar. And basically the idea here is that if the school calendar overlaps with the agricultural calendar, we can have two effects. One effect can be that some students will, the time will be conflicted between either attending school or going to farm. But the other effect is also that the amount of time allocated to farming activity is also going to decrease. So we have both effects. And what Alain basically showed in Malawi, I think, is that when the school calendar interacts with the agricultural calendar, there is a sharp decline in learning outcomes, and also the capacity of students actually to graduate from one class to another. Yes.
It's amazing because I don't know if you know why in France we have holidays in July and August. It dates back to the 19th century. And it was because many at that time many households were farmers. Okay. And it was because the child had to be with the family and the family.
That makes a lot of sense. Actually, in the context of this study, one nice thing that we can also see is when you look at the school calendars of countries throughout Sub-Saharan Africa, you are going to see two truths. Countries that were colonized by France all have school calendar that starts in September and ends in June. But those that were colonized by English-speaking countries, they have a calendar that is shifted. It's shifted and starts in December, January to end in. So it's actually quite interesting to see that this school calendar has also been exported. And one question is this calendar actually that we are observing across Sub-Saharan Africa, is it actually fit to a context of Sub-Saharan Africa? That was a discussion. And the other thing that we also wanted basically to point out here is that, okay, so we know that school practices matter. We also know that school calendar matters, but what we also start to learn more and more is actually that temperature also matters. And temperature matters in two ways. Not only do we have that high temperature is going to affect learning outcomes, so meaning that the score that you have at the end of the academic year is going to be lower if the temperature rises by 1 degree. But also, it matters when you are taking an exam. So when you are taking an exam during a very hot day, you are going to underperform. So not only high temperature matters for what you learn day to day, but it also matters in the sense that it can actually penalize you when you are taking an exam. So this is basically the literature as it is. And what we are trying to do here is to say that while it's not just temperature, that rainy days per se also matter. That rainy days matter because they are going to disturb the classroom environment for people who actually go to school during rainy days, but they can also matter because they may prevent teachers from going to school. So, and this is basically the contribution that we are trying to do to the literature, saying that we know that temperature affects the capacity of students to learn at school. We know that temperature affects your ability basically to focus during exam, but rainy days, because they are going to disrupt the class environment, they can also affect your ability to learn. But not only that, they can also affect your ability to go to school and to learn in the first place.
Maybe you will be more explicit about this, but some slides ago, it was written rain shocks. And now you're currently speaking about rainy days.
Exactly.
So I was expecting that rain shocks were abnormal rains compared to standard rainy days.
You are right, and this is actually something that we are trying to do on purpose. We understand rainfall shock as our preferred approach to measure income shock, because basically rainfall shock are going to have an effect on how much income agricultural households are going to derive from the activity, but they can also have some local economic effect, because if you harvest, even if you are not farmers, you're also going to be affected because there's going to be less economic activities to go in. And we actually want to really separate this income shock from the nuisance that rainy school days per se represent. Like when it is raining, but maybe I have to take it in the context of Sub-Saharan Africa, tropical Sub-Saharan Africa, where when it is really heavy rainfall. Like what we call rainy days in Benin, or at least throughout the tropical Sub-Saharan African region, are usually compared to small rain that I get here in Paris, they are really heavy rainfall. So maybe there are both things. Like we have heavy rain, but people are used to heavy rain. But what we really want to bring home in this paper is that it's not the amount of rainfall that matters. It's just that when it is raining, it's really super hard to go to school, and you are going to either stay at home. And when you go to school, you have the disturbance created by raindrops that basically prevents you from focusing.
Heterogeneity when looking at rain days.
Yeah. Then what we are going to do is to compare how students perform in neighborhoods that got slightly more rainy school days compared to. The question is in.
Surrounding the economic environment such that these impacts cannot be smoothed by without a view. So, for instance, I get the money. Sub-Saharan Africa is not the only one that suffers from these kind of events. So, I think that it happens in so many countries like in Asia, so on and so forth. It depends on how we can counteract the effect of this impact. Either I don't know whether there is a way to resort to other way of learning or shifting the calendar. So because we have in mind what we can do.
Yeah.
So you have to either adapt the calendar to say, well, I'm going to shift the school depending on the time, or we found it a peak way to install adaptation like air conditioning, but we know that the energy access is a problem. So I mean, there is a context, an economic context that is perhaps specific and that we don't have in other countries that have the same climate.
That's so true, and that's actually what makes the second part of this research program quite complicated, because what we actually want to do now is to go back to Benin. I'm from Benin. I actually tend to focus on Benin, and actually ask school headmasters, how do they deal with rainy school days? I mean, do they basically decide to postpone the end of the academic year to catch up to make up for all the rainy school days missed, or are they doing something else? So instead of coming with, and the other thing is that we think that changing the school calendar might not work, because I mean, we have inertia. People are already used to how academic calendar is organized, and it's not clear what will be like the response from changing the calendar. So it seems to us that, yes, it is a problem. And now maybe the question is, how can we think differently of the school production function to still make school work during rainy school days? And yeah, we have a lot to learn from people who are on the ground. And
we want
electricity.
So, which is the other problem.
Other questions? No?
Yeah, just from my own understanding, are there some rain seasons, and when are they?
And there are, I'm going to use several countries, so I can give you a reply for Benin, but given that we have so many countries in our study, this is not going to hold for the other. But at least for Benin, in the south of Benin, you have two rainy seasons. One small rainy season between March and June, and another one that comes between October and November. And it varies depending on where you are. So in the southern part, you have two rainy seasons, but in the northern part, which is closer to the Sahel region, you only have one rainy season. And this is also part of what we are going to use, kind of. So what is actually the education strategy here? And so we rely on the fact that the school calendar is the same for all the schools. And all the schools have to provide 180 days of schooling to all the children. And basically what we are going to say is that given that all the schools have the same calendar, they start at the same time and they end at the same time, when we have rain during school days is going to penalize some schools compared to others. And mostly what you are going to say is that rainfall during, I mean, people don't choose when it rains, but rainfall during a school day is exogenous. This is actually what creates the variation across schools. And given that what you're basically saying is that rainfall during school days is the thing that matters, it has an implication, a falsification. The falsification is that rainfall during weekend should not matter, and rainfall during school break should also not matter. And those are actually the two things that we are going to do to check that what we are exploiting as variation is not something that is inherent to the local places, but is really the fact that when it is raining during the school days, you can't go to school. And when you go to school, you can't really do. So that's our main identification strategy and the falsification test that we are going to provide to show you, at least to try to make sure that what we are capturing is not an inherent spatial variation of economic condition between location, but is really something that has to do with rainy spaces. Okay.
Rainfall during the weekends though can still impact infrastructure.
That's true.
Is that so important to remove the weekend? It is.
Yeah, that's true. No, what you are saying is that yes, the falsification test can fail if we have some persistence, which is completely true. So failing this falsification test doesn't mean that our effect is not there, but actually what you're going to show is that the falsification test seems to work.
We made a comment a few minutes ago, but the fact that during the wet season, it can be a way to favor like parasites or some kind of diseases that can also play when going to school.
That's indeed. Yeah, because we actually have malaria, and yes, when it rains, you can actually have a lot of mosquito bites. And yeah, that's true. I haven't really thought of that. I don't know how this is going to affect the story, but it's very something I have to keep in mind. Yeah.
Is it possible, like there's a selection bias maybe in the sample, maybe high-income people sort themselves in places where there's less rainfall, so it's not really random.
Thanks. This is actually a challenge. The challenge is that we can have residential sorting, like parents who care about the number of school days can actually sort themselves into locations which have less rainy school days. And this is actually, and I'm going to, I will give you the answer. At least how we try to account for that. And the other challenge is that in terms of mechanism, it's not the same thing to say that students are not learning because they can't go to school, or when they go to school, they can't learn, or to say that students are not learning because the rainy school days basically are going to signal that the farming season is going to come soon, and then they have to go to farm, and that is the fact that they are going they are doing farm work that is actually having an effect. So what you are also trying to do is to check that the effect is not mostly driven by students who do farm work. That it is also an effect that we find for students who do not do farm work. Okay, so what are we doing here exactly? So because we were really mindful of this residential sorting effect, we tried to use data sets for which we can know at the beginning of the academic year what is, we can have a measure of students, of student ability. Saying basically that if I have your level at the beginning of the year and I test you at the end of the year, the only thing that basically happens between the beginning and the end is going to be the effect that I am interested in. So our strategy is actually to say that we are going to check how the number of rainy school days during the academic calendar affects your test score at the end of the year, controlling for your test score at the beginning of it. So if there is a residential sorting, the test score at the beginning of the year should account for all the characteristics of the parents that create the residential sorting. So that's actually, and so we went and looked for the data set that allows us to have students being tested at the beginning of the year, students being tested at the end of the year, and we are going to regress the number of rainy school days on the test score at the end of the year, controlling for the test score at the beginning. And we have therefore data set, we have data, and what is this? So this data that we are using is the data produced by PASEC. So PASEC between 2004 and 2010 used to test students twice, once at the beginning of the year, and then a second time at the end of the year. So since 2014, they stopped doing that, and now they're testing students only once at the end of it. So that's actually why our period of analysis is going to be shortened, and we'll only focus on the period 2004. And we are going to have data set covering Benin, 10 countries throughout Sub-Saharan Africa.
Would it be problematic to continue after 2014 and just to take this year's performance and take last year's performance as well?
Oh, yeah. Is because they don't test students. They only test students who are at the beginning of primary school, so when they are in CP, and at the end of primary school when they are in CML. So they are not testing students each year. It's just they come every 4 years or so, and they only test students once. Okay. Okay, so this is basically the main idea. So we have the test score at the end that we are going to regress on the number of rainy school days in the location of the school, controlling for the test score at the beginning of the year. And we are going to control, just for the sake of getting much more precision, from some student characteristics, school characteristic, characteristic of the administrative unit where the school are located. And because we are pulling data set from different surveys, we are going to add in some country fixed effect, basically to control for the fact that maybe there's some variation in the way the tests were administered from one school, from one country to the other. So yeah, the identification strategy is quite clear and simple. So what, yeah, Anna.
What do they test?
They have a test in French, and basically in French is going to be, the test is basically tailored to the curricula. And so in French is going, so in CP is going to, can you identify the correct word that describes a situation? So it's going to be pictures and what is these people doing and this type of thing. And in mathematics, it's going to be, so CP is going to be simple addition, no, recognize the number and associate them to the name, and also do some simple arithmetic. And for people who are actually finishing with primary school, is going to be the ability to subtract, to divide, to do multiplication, and to solve small problem. Like I have 10 euros, I bought something for 2 euros. No, it's not like skills. No, it's really different. The idea here is really to check to which extent have you mastered the skills that you are supposed to master in that particular group. So the philosophy is a bit different from this. Okay, so So what are we looking at here? So the first column here is just the raw correlation between the number of rainy school days, which is standardized, and the test score at the end of second. And I'm showing you the first column mostly because I actually want to show you the second column. The second column is what happens when we control for the test score at the beginning of the year, which basically goes exactly in the direction that you had in mind. And it shows that actually adding this control captures a lot of unobserved heterogeneity that might actually come from residential sorting. But the third column is basically what happens when we add in the student and school characteristics. It improves, the coefficient decreases, but not that as much as what happens when we add it in. So basically, this goes to show that having this test score at the beginning of the year really helps make the identification strategy much more convincing and control for residential sorting in a way. So now once we have this and we have like our much more conservative estimate, basically what we are seeing here is that one standard deviation of rainy school days, and one standard deviation is usually 15 more rainy school days, is associated with a reduction in test score of 0.1 standard deviation. And what you have to know is that from other studies, we know that during a regular academic calendar, students are supposed to improve the learning outcome by 1 standard deviation. So it's actually like 1 standard deviation of rainy school days basically reduces your learning outcome by 10%, which is huge. So 15 days of rainy school days reduces the amount of things that you can learn at the end of the academic year by 10%, which is quite a big difference. Yeah. This is what? Yeah, it's only no. It's a mix of public and private.
I was wondering because there is some I don't know if you can call it private. So to understand whether.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Also, the way this is not only the impact of outside characteristics, but also the way in which the ceiling itself is organized.
Well, what we can definitely do, yeah, we'll do that. Among the school characteristics, we are adding as control whether it is a private or public school. But I think what can actually be nice is also to see how the effect varies between private and public school.
Yeah, because you can make, I don't know whether it is nice, but in the context of, we also have better infrastructure, better insulation, so we can like the noise, maybe different. So it's not necessarily the fact that I'm not saying that the religious school is better, but they have perhaps a better infrastructure.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. We did try to, I think, but it was just clumsy. We tried basically to look at how the materials. I mean, we know what the walls of the schools are made of, but ideally, what we wanted, what we would have preferred, is how. I mean, what is the material of the roof? Because I think that the roof will actually matter more. Like if you have like a roof made of metal, that yeah. But we didn't have that in our data set. But yeah, we played around these materials, but we didn't find anything. But maybe at least do something between private and public to check if to check the roofs. I haven't done.
Actually connected to you. How do you define a rainy day? Probably you said it, but like, is that a threshold? Because I would expect non-linear effects first. And yeah, and then it connects to those to the materials and everything. And it also probably there is a threshold that they influence income somehow. And then you have an impact that is probably live too. And on this, there's a second question. Can you follow the students actually from the first testing, so the first year in which they are testing, just to the second time they are tested? Oh, that's too bad.
No, I can do
So
that.
sad.
No, I can only follow them throughout the year, between
Okay.
the first test
Yeah,
and
of
the second
course.
test, but not.
Not the second time.
Not the second. And actually, what we are using here, so yeah, you are right. I didn't spend time on the data set. We are using the CHIPS data set that most of you know. So basically, the idea here is just because CHIPS data set are daily, we can actually match the CHIPS data set with the academic calendar and count the number of. So a rainy event is an event where we have like a positive rainfall measured by the CHIPS.
So you don't have a deviation from a peer. So it's like
Yeah,
if
that,
they are used or not to certain random
that's
rate.
the thing. We are not using it. It comes back to a question that was asked about the shock. So we can definitely do that, which is like a deviation in terms of rain, in terms of the level with respect to the mean and the standard deviation. But we are not doing that because we think that this is really going to only capture the real, I mean, the abnormal deviation is going to be a shock.
Yeah.
Whereas here, what we want really like that. A rainy day during school day is actually per se already a shock. So,
Right, but it's just that maybe the infrastructure, they are based already on the kind of environment that you have there.
yeah, we can definitely. I mean, actually, we have a version of the same estimate using the value of the rainfall per se, not, and we find the same result. It's just that I didn't want to make the story about a shock. I basically wanted to tell a story about rainy days per se.
Yeah, I totally understand. I would be curious to see if there are pressure.
But yeah, I can do that.
I'm super curious.
Yes, you have a question.
Yeah, sorry, two questions maybe on that. The first one is, so yeah, how do you make a distinction between rural areas and urban areas in the regions? And the second one is, some of this population I think are still first, because like to the movement in the region, and to take into account that
What we do is to check whether so remember that we test the student at the beginning and at the end of the year, so we can actually know which students were absent at the end of the year. And we actually do find that we don't find the rainy school days are not correlated with absenteeism. So it goes to answer your question about nomadic behavior, the fact that people move. So it doesn't seem to be the case that in location where it is raining a lot, people will tend basically to migrate in using different paths. With respect to rural urban, we are not per se doing anything about rural urban. We just know that the sampling strategy that was used to select the schools was meant to generate a representative sample of all the schools in the country. So it's really spread throughout the country.
The impact will be heterogeneous, like for public-private schools, you can imagine that.
Yes, and then we actually need basically to come up with a consistent definition of what we are going to call rural across all the different countries to make sure that, and we all know that this is never easy. But yes, I can definitely, so we haven't done that many heterogeneity tests to look at, okay, how do the results vary? We only did two types of heterogeneity exercises. One is about gender. Are girls more affected than boys? And another thing about age. I'm going to show you this. But I will keep in mind that rural is interesting and private is also.
Two further ideas. Maybe in the line with the threshold remarked by Julia, could you imagine that there can be some non-linear effect, like maybe a few rainy days they have an impact, but it's okay, and at some point children just drop out because they miss too much teaching. And the second one that is related to that is the timing of the rainy days, whether it is at the beginning of the academic year or at the end. In France, for instance, the last month of school, you don't do anything. So you don't care if you go to school or not. So maybe.
Yes, we did that. We did both. How the timing matters, but for that, we didn't find any clear pattern. But maybe it's because we are doing the timing, we're using the same timing for all the countries. So maybe we didn't interact the timing with the country. Maybe that's actually one thing that we should do. Is January the same in
the academic year?
Yeah.
Most of the effect that you're saying could be solved by interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
In this case, it could be like number of rainy days of the first trimester of the
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that even the first trimester might not have the same effect in Benin as compared to Madagascar, or in Benin as compared to Congo, Brazzaville, because Congo compared to Benin, I mean, Congo is like really tropical, a tropical region, and it has nothing to do in terms of rainfall activities. You see what I mean? So, yes, Anna.
Well, this is specific to rainy days. If you understand how things are run, you check also for heat.
Yes, we did. We did for heat wave, and I'm not putting too much emphasis on that because it is not, given that the literature has already covered how heat wave affects.
I mean, to have a consistent check within your sample to understand whether really either you confirm and you talk to the literature or whether rainy days are really specific.
Oh, no. We also have an effect on heat wave. Not just on heat wave, but actually how an increase, 1 more degree, an average with respect to the neighboring place, how does it affect? But what is actually the effects for the heat wave, or at least for how hot it is, seems actually to be much more driven by comparing larger region than by comparing different neighborhoods within the same administrative unit. Because compared to, it seems that the spatial correlation of heat is actually much more stronger than the spatial correlation of rainy days. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
I understand. So I think there is interesting result.
Yeah, we can definitely replicate the heat wave result. It's just that the coefficient is just one star. It's not that big, and
because in terms of climate change, it has an importance. It's also special attention in place depending on the severity of heat waves or.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's something that we're not putting out there because it's not such a big addition to the literature. But maybe it's nice to replicate what is already there. So we also find the same effect for students at the end of primary school, so in 5th grade. It's just that the size of the effect is smaller, and I'll come back to that. Now, the second family of results that we also found is in terms of grade repetition. So not only do students end up the academic year with lower outcomes, but they're actually much more likely to repeat. Meaning that, so this is for students in 2nd grade, so those students, they are like 2 percentage points much more likely to repeat the class, so to come back. So it seems that rainy school days not only reduce your ability to learn, but they're actually you're also going to be penalized because you will have basically to repeat the class. But we don't find that effect for students in the field. So it seems to be only located, or at least only we only find it for students at the beginning of primary school. So what we are looking at here are how the results vary across countries. So the first part of the graph here is for each countries, for students in second grade, and here for all the countries for students in fifth grade. So yeah, clearly there are some countries where the academic calendar, at least the school system seems to be much more resilient to rainy school days, like Madagascar and Congo, for instance. But what is also nice to look to remark on this graph is that the effects are always higher for students at the beginning of the academic primary school compared to students in fifth grade. And basically what we are saying in this paper is that because students in second grade are much more likely to repeat, the students who manage basically to move to the next class are those who have an environment that makes them much more immune to the penalty of rainy school days. And that can actually explain why rainy school days in fifth grade is having less and less of an effect, because those students who are living in an environment where they cannot compensate for school days missed, they will be held behind. And only those who are, so we have a self-selection that is going on. And what I have in mind is that parents can actually invest in remedial schooling, because students, one practice that is really common in Benin is those who can afford will have like a private teacher for the children, and this effect can per se can actually help remediate to rainy schools. Okay, so what have we done? Other thing that we did is basically to change the identification strategy. So here I was actually comparing rainy school days. We are comparing administrative units that have different rainy school days. We can actually compare neighborhood within the same administrative unit. So this is what I'm doing. And for that, we could not do it for all the countries. We only did it for two countries, Benin and Senegal, because for Benin and Senegal, we were actually able to, thanks to Edouard, we were actually able to geolocate and have a GPS coordinate of all the schools, and we could actually compare within the same administrative unit, schools that are different in different neighborhoods. And we could replicate the same results. And we also did the falsification test, which shows what? Which shows that we don't, so this is number of rainy school days during holidays is not, doesn't reduce score. It doesn't increase repetition. This is actually like a false rejection. It doesn't have any significant effect on the score for students in fifth grade, and doesn't also affect the repetition. And the same for rainfall during weekends. So basically, this is a falsification exercise. Like instead of using the rainy school days, we're actually using the rainy weekends and the rainy school breaks that don't seem to generate the effect that we found earlier. And for participation to farm activities, how much time do I have? Is okay. So let's look at, so for participation to farm activities, what we did is, so this is the result that I have already presented. So in this column, what we're actually doing is we are interacting the number of rainy school days depending on whether the student at the beginning of the year told us that he used to do farm work. So for students who told us at the beginning of the year that they used to do farm work, we don't seem to find that they are differently affected compared to students who don't do farm work, because this is the effect for students who don't do farm work, and this is the effect for students who do farm work. It's the sum of the main effect and the interaction. So,
so you're saying that, so I understand the driving effect of expecting that the difference is that those learning activities, they, in any case, they lose some skills because they are more absent than the others.
They are much more likely to be absent than the others. So I was actually expecting that the effect might actually be even stronger for them. What we are seeing here is that, well, it's not statistically different, but I was expecting something that would actually be much more negative, but it doesn't seem to be that.
I don't
Yeah,
really
thanks.
understand the rationale. Why should it be stronger? Because if you have a mild brain, actually you have higher productivity, and so you need to put less work, agricultural work.
Oh yeah, okay. No, but maybe you are
So
right.
it depends on the distribution on the axis.
Yeah, that's the thing. So this effect, I am interpreting it as when it is raining, I can go to school. If I cannot go to school, maybe my teacher cannot go to school. And then I'm not learning. But if we also have the same thing, but not only I'm not going to school, but because I am in a place that receives a lot of rainy school days, then I also have to go to farm. Maybe it can be additive. Like I have the absence because the school was closed or whatever, but I also have the absence because I have to go to do some farm work. So I don't know to which extent school being closed and farm work overlap, or whether they are going to take place at different periods and then they can add up.
And this also
Does it make
varies
sense?
depending on the country, because
Yeah, it can also vary.
climate in this region,
Yeah.
agricultural work.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe that's actually what we have to do.
There are
In which case do we have like a complete overlap with agricultural activity, and then is not additive because it coincides? And in which case do we have they come one after the other, and maybe then the other? I know that this relates to one of your other papers, but maybe we can discuss it later.
Yeah, no. But with the doubt for animal husbandry, maybe if it's rainy, you go anyhow to see the animals. But like for farming, I doubt you go in the field if it's rain.
No, but you can go to, basically the way I think of it is that when it starts raining, it basically the signal to start basically preparing the field to sow and this type of thing. So it is a signal that you have to prepare the farm. And because you have to prepare the farm, the cheap labor, the labor force that you will need will actually also come from your children. They're going to take your children to the farm to do that activities. And the question is it something that adds up, or is it something that takes place during your
So it's interesting for older students, right? Because maybe there's a check that you can do with the youngest and the oldest, because the age. Yeah.
Yes.
The first test,
That will.
people are in the first year, right? So, but not.
Yeah, that's something that I actually. Okay, I will show you the results. It doesn't go in the direction that I was anticipating. Okay, so what is it that now the mechanism? So okay, so basically we showed you that rainy school days have a penalty that come with them. But what is the mechanism? I mean, is it because schools are closed, or what is going on? I actually we don't have data set on with the number of days during which the school were closed. What we have data set on are on absenteeism. And the absenteeism basically comes from a questionnaire that was left to the school headmaster. And the school headmaster was asked to, for each month to basically declare the number of school days missed by the teacher, of which the students have been evaluated. And this is basically what we see. So the number of rainy schools, we find that teachers are much more likely to be absent. And this is particularly the case for teachers in second grade. So teachers are much more likely to be absent. We don't find any effects on student absenteeism. And the other thing that we can also see is that when we ask the teachers, have you managed basically to complete the academic curricula of that year? they are less likely to complete the academic curriculum in reading and in mathematics. So it seems to be like one effect, at least one of the main mechanisms, is that teachers are much more likely to miss, are much more likely to be absent. And because they're much more likely to be absent, they will not complete the academic curricula. And then maybe that makes sense that the student perform worse at the end of the year when they're being tested.
Can there be a transition between teachers' absenteeism and student mood? Like a lot of rainy days, the teachers are not coming, so students starting to say, well, the teacher is never there, so I'm not going anymore. Like that.
But in that case, we will expect something.
That.
Yeah, but it's also the case that this variable was reported by the teacher themselves, and it is like
We're there.
so.
We can suspect.
So yeah, so I cannot really rule out that students are not there. It's just that maybe you are maybe you are right that it is that mechanism, but just that we cannot really test for student absenteeism in a confident way. I mean, I have this result, but I don't know how much trust I can put in.
So in order to understand if what you were saying, when there is a problem for learning, meeting knowledge, why don't you include this kind of data on absenteeism in the main regression? I guess there's some preliminary issues, but well, you can do the two-step regression.
Oh yeah, I see what you mean.
Distinguish the problems of teachers' absenteeism and the problems due to the structure of the curriculum.
No, you're right. It's because I didn't have a strong prior about the mechanism. So I could not really think of an IV strategy where what matters is absenteeism. I'm going to instrument absenteeism by the but and I think that the exclusion restriction, my prior is that the exclusion restriction will not hold, because I was thinking of student absenteeism, teacher absenteeism. There is also the learning environment. So there's so many different mechanisms for which it could go that I could not really use a convincing IV strategy. And therefore, basically what you say is, let's show the reduced form effect, and let's find which of the mechanisms seems to respond to our instrumental variable, kind of. And so this is our strategy, is just because we don't think that the exclusion restriction will hold if we, does it make sense? You see why?
Yeah, but I'm kind of thinking that is the maybe you have other variables which are driving the absenteeism of teachers. So why not try to run it together?
Maybe we can just, I just think that if we would have to run it together, we will need to make a strong assumption about why is it that yeah, we have to make some exclusion restriction assumption at some point to capture the range. Okay, and we actually don't, yeah, maybe it's not well identified. We can also see that teacher in the 5th grade also less likely to complete the curricula, but we don't find any strong evidence that they are much more likely to be absent. So it seems to be that something is going on with teacher in 2nd grade, but not that much with teacher in 5th.
What would be the driver of that? Like teachers from the 2nd grade are very different, would be very different from the one in 5th grade?
What this suggests to us is that we need to look at how school headmaster allocate teachers across grades. What type of teacher do we allocate at the beginning of a primary school, and what type of teacher do get to?
But you don't have reporting about the speech of the teacher.
No, I don't. We have something that we didn't really look at. We asked, the teachers were also tested, because there were like a dictée. I don't know how you say dictée in English. And a dictée with a lot of spelling mistakes. And the teacher were asked to find the correct spelling mistake. So maybe we could use that. We haven't, that will require some work. Yeah.
Side that they also implied.
Yeah. So this is something that we can definitely try to do to get to a bottom of what is the difference between teachers at the in second grade and the teacher in fifth.
Well, there is a matter of skills as a teacher, but here it's more a matter of commitment. Also, then that's maybe more difficult to.
Yeah, that's difficult. Yeah. Yeah, definitely there's something about teacher in second. Yes.
Going back to the private public school, could it be that as private school, maybe there are colleagues that are suggesting teachers already live inside the school, and so they're not affected by transport or the fact that they have to.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know where the teachers. We don't have any data set on that. But no, I think definitely. We didn't really explore the private-public interaction, but we will look at that.
That's a policy recommendation. Build a teacher's house.
New policy measure. Teachers don't have to go.
But also students sometimes, if they're academies, they live inside the school.
Yeah, that's true. But this is really primary school. So I think this matters for secondary school because they are usually further away from where people live, and then you actually need basically to accommodate for students who have to travel a long distance. But for primary school, they are so ubiquitous because they're having a lot of investment to expand access to primary school since 2000. But I think, yes, something about the teacher, how far do they live, at least, we don't have this information, but at least we can look at difference between private and public school and see if.
But in urban areas, probably teachers live closer than.
No, not necessarily. Okay, so let's start wrapping up this presentation. So basically what we find is that rainy school days have deleterious effects, mostly through teacher absenteeism, which basically prevent them from completing the curricula. And the other thing is that because students in second grade are also penalized because they have to repeat, we actually have like a selection of a student who can really manage to complete the primary school. And it turns out that those students who get to the fifth grade seems to be immune to some extent to the rainy school days effect penalty. We didn't find any strong evidence that students who are doing farm work are worse affected than other students, but we actually did find something strange on age. So I didn't want to show that, but Anna's question basically just begged for that. Okay, so this is the puzzle. What I was expecting is that because of farm work, that students who are older will be much affected. What we actually find is that the older the students, the less affected they are. So it seems to be like it's mostly students who are young who are more affected. And one way to make sense of it is that when you are young, maybe your parents don't really want to let you go to school when it is raining. They basically prefer to keep you home. Maybe that was my case, because I mean I do remember that I used to stay home. And when you are old enough, you can just go and go to school even when it is raining. So I don't know.
Is there a big drop-in rate between the two, right? Between the second grade and the fifth grade, if there is a big drop-in rate of the students, right? So
yes.
Maybe even the most motivated one.
Yeah, and that goes back to a statistic that I started with. Like 6 out of 10 students are of school age, but are not going to school because there is also dropping rate. And it is also related to to the repetition. If you send your kid to school and he keeps repeating the class, you're just going to stop sending your kid to school. So dropping rate is also correlated with grade repetition. And this is actually something that other studies have also been pointing out, that grade repetition is really inefficient because it doesn't help the students who repeat learn, and the students are actually going to drop out. So maybe it is worth having like automatic promotion and give a chance to the student to catch up by learning with the peers instead of repeating. But this is a completely other story.
About this story, can you check whether age has an influence on absenteeism?
Yes, I can do that.
Skip school because of rainy days, but
yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
Another story would be distraction. Like maybe younger kids, they are more easily distracted by the noise than when you get older and when you can concentrate.
Yeah.
The story that you can test.
The problem with age is that it makes the story a bit much more complicated, and that's why I was not showing it. I cannot also make any sense of this for now. But yes, it's open the room to maybe the. Yes.
Maybe the closer you are from the determinant exams, the less important are all the trouble that police strong are the trouble that make you don't go to school. And you have the determinant exam, whatever happens, I have to go to school because I have to pass this exam. It can explain in terms of marks,
Okay.
or maybe on grades.
Okay.
For example, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know that when you start the college, skipping classes in CGL the first year is not important, but in ODM, because you determine the future, whatever happens, even if you are sick, maybe you can.
You have the time at which you are tested the second time?
Oh, they are all tested because the academic year ends in June. They are all tested in May, just one month before.
Just to add to what has been just said, I really think that age and the grade is really important because I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Tamil, for example, there is an exam at the end of the year, and in 5th grade, to go to secondary school. Yeah, there is an exam, so teachers and students are much more invested in 5th grade than in 2nd grade or 1st grade, whether it's raining or not, because there is an exam, and if you don't pass the exam,
Interesting. Yeah. So that could explain why we don't have that much absenteeism from teacher in 5th.
But I mean, much more than the immunity you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a selection coming from. I mean, what we showed in the repetition, we showed that there is a selection. But maybe that's also something that adds.
Even without the exam at the end, like it's between the 2nd and 5th grade, we stay in the same school. So basically your teaching, your skills are within the school.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is the stakes of changing to the other school, and then you have to show that your pupils they did well, and so you invest more for this.
Yeah, that can explain the 5th. Yeah, no, that makes sense. But okay. So where does this leave us? It leaves us. So
we're going to create a program interested in this seminar on schooling.
But that's the next step. Is actually yes. What is the best way, basically, to at least to alleviate the penalty for students in 2nd grade? Actually, they seem to be affected, even if we are not clear about how should we interpret what we are observing in the 5th grade. Is it like an attenuation due to the fact that there is an exam coming and everyone is actually on their best behavior? We still do see there is some penalty. So on average, across the different countries, there is a penalty. it varies from one country to another, but on average, there's a supplement. What we think is that instead of coming up with a solution, maybe it is worth listening or at least cataloging what school headmasters and teachers are already doing, because they must be already aware of what is going on during the rainy school days, and identify what are the best practices that maybe we can test using RCTs and scale up it. So actually, this is our what we are projecting to do. But if you have other ideas, I'm very I am listening, and thanks for sharing this experience, and for asking questions and for engaging with this presentation. Thanks a lot.